Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Transport Advisory Group on the 26th of February. I'm overseeing the election of chair as vice chair of the council. So first we'll have apologies and any notices, please.
I understand that we've got apologies from Councillor Northover, and also I will go through the housekeeping notice for this morning. So please note that this meeting is being recorded by the council for live broadcast and will be published on the council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the assembly point at the War Memorial in the gardens opposite the front of this building in Bourne Avenue. Finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on your laptops. Thank you.
Thank you. So, agenda item 2, election of chair. Can I call for nominations for the election of chair for the 24-25 municipal year? Tony.
Yourself, Simon?
Thank you, Simon. I don't need to change my seat then. Thank you. Election of vice chair. Can I call for nominations for the election of vice chair? Can I propose Councillor McCormack? Thank Okay, thank you. And so Councillor Bull, myself, has been elected as chair and Councillor McCormack as vice chair. Thank you, everybody. Moving on, agenda item 4. Do we have any declarations of interest?
None received currently. If any do arise, obviously raise them at the time.
Agenda item 5. Any public issues?
There are no public presentations that have been received in advance of this morning's meeting.
Thank you. So if we can move straight on to item 6, our place and environment local transport plan. If the officers would like to introduce the report, please.
So, Chair, that would be myself.
Oh, sorry.
So, for the record, my name is Richard Pincroft. I'm Head of Transport and Sustainable Travel. I'm here to obviously present the papers for this item and the next agenda item, and I'll be supported by officers to my right-hand side of John McVeigh and Susan Fox. So, Susan Fox is our Capital Programme Manager, and John McVeigh is our Sustainable Transport Policy Manager. Okay. So the first item is the LTP 25-26 capital programme item. This is a report to Cabinet, and it recommends the Cabinet recommend to Council to approve the 25-26 local transport plan capital programme as set out in Appendix A. I'll come back and I'll revisit Appendix A in a minute with you. It also seeks to delegate delivery of the Active Travel Fund 5 grant to the Director of Planning and Transport in consultation with the portfolio holder for climate response, environment, energy, and holder for destination, leisure and commercial operations. Those are effectively the portfolio holders that cover transport and cover road safety, because obviously those elements are covered by the local transport plan. There's also a C recommendation, which may look and appear a little bit odd, that we're trying to seek approval for a capital programme so many years in advance without having the allocation confirmed. That's because as part of our highways maintenance efficiency programme, we're often required by government to demonstrate that we're forward planning, and that helps us with our score rating to ensure that we get the highest amount of funding possible for the authority in terms of capital programme maintenance. Okay. A couple of things to note is that we're seeking the approval, delegated approval, to deliver the Active Travel Fund 5. That's actually a cabinet recommendation because it's not above the threshold to trigger full council. And we were informed of that during the autumn in November 2024 that we'd be getting £478,000 for Active Travel Fund schemes. Other items to note, there's a follow-on item on the agenda today to do with the bus service improvement plan which is seeking approval of £3.2 million worth of funding. So there's not a lot of detail in this report, but it is obviously referenced just so it's clear in the schedule at the end of the report how much money is being invested in public transport. Another item that's just been updated recently is that we've just had confirmed our local electric vehicle infrastructure grant has finally been approved by central government, and again we can do some further reporting on that a bit later. Big thing to notice for this year is that we've been allocated approximately £2 million more in structural maintenance funding, so that's obviously set out in the schedule at the back of the report, which is positive news from central government. And that is contingent, or part of that is contingent, or the uplift on us. It's described as what's called an incentive element, which means it's contingent on the council demonstrating compliance with investing that money in an efficient way, which is why I'm referring to getting those future years programmes approved as well, which are obviously in appendices. So just running down through the appendices. So Appendix A, effectively, if you are looking at that, I think it's on page 10 of the notes. What we're seeking approval for, in effect, just to make it clear to all members here today, your recommendation for approval to Cabinet, of course, is that the column that's shaded in dark grey and has got the bold type is effectively the column that we're seeking approval for. That's the local transport plan capital grant allocation, which we get awarded, by the Department for Transport on an annual basis to help inform and yourselves and members of the public alike in terms of how the wider funding is being invested. We've also included external grants that have already been secured, and also indicative spend during 25-26 if money has been brought forward from any sort of previous year, as it were. So you might note, for example, under the local electric vehicle infrastructure line, the LTP capital funding is actually zero, but we've got an external grant coming in to fund the installation of electric vehicle chargers to the tune of 1.447 million during the course of next year, for example. And that's essentially it. So the schedule is, set out as it is in the report, and and then that follows through from the integrated transport block bit element, which is in sort of green, and then it goes through to sort of orangey coloured, which is the structural maintenance area further down. And then beneath that is what I referred to earlier as the indicative future years programmes for the highway maintenance. So that would be for 2026-27 and 2027-28. And that really is to demonstrate to the Department for Transport that we, are ranking and assessing our schemes, and that's how we would invest future years funding if it and as and when it comes forward. So that's it on that item. So any questions?
Lovely, thank you. Any questions, members? Councillor Trent.
Yeah, I think during my year as mayor, amongst the people I met, I'm pretty certain there was a commercial company that was prepared to provide, if they had permission, EV charging points in public car parks free of cost to whoever, but obviously they needed permission to use the space and so on. And I'm wondering whether that kind of possibility has been fully explored, because it's quite a lot of money to put into electric charging points when obviously sort of supermarkets and people like that have got it built into their car parks, and people have them in their homes and so on. And I'm wondering what kind of charging points are we looking at? Are we looking at perhaps lampposts in residential streets that you can charge your vehicle on, or what? And as I say, whether we've explored the possibility of people providing this at their cost Because much as we don't fill up petrol and diesel cars, that's a sort of commercial operation that does that. And I'm kind of wondering whether we've fully explored the possibilities there rather than put a lot of public money into it.
Richard?
I'll let John.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. If I can respond to Councillor Trent on that one. Two things. We are already in the final stages, really, of delivering supplier-funded electric vehicle charge points, principally in BCP Council car parks. So we've been doing that for the last couple of years or so. And we now have 152 charging bays that the council has facilitated at no cost to the council, and they are, as I say, supplier funded. They earn a small amount for the council, which will help in the council's administration of those charge points. So we're already underway with that programme, and those are fast chargers and rapid chargers. The difference with the Levi funding is these are for low-powered chargers. The grant conditions are very strict, and the grant is to support support residents without off-street car parking of their own. So they're to go in residential streets, not car parks, residential streets, and they are likely to be 7 kilowatt chargers, which is the very low-powered chargers. So they're the slow ones. So this will be volume. We anticipate at least 750 sockets going in. Sadly, they won't be attached to lamp columns because the majority of our lamp columns are at the rear of the footway, and it doesn't facilitate that in this area. So they will have to be separate charging units. We're currently out to tender, actually. We've been very quick to get the tender out. It's a 6-week tender. And we'll know more about it at the end of the tender, but we're expecting some investment from the winning bidder as well. So it won't just be public money going into these, but these are low-powered chargers, and in contrast to the fast and the rapid chargers that have been going in car parks for the last 2 years.
Councillor Rice, and then Councillor Hadley.
Well, it was just to respond a little bit to what John's saying, because there was in full council there was discussion around the possibility for people to be able to charge from their domestic supply, and we are still investigating the possibility of having gullies across the pavement. Obviously, there are issues about making sure that's not a trip hazard. The other part of that is trying to keep the pavements clear for pedestrians. So the idea of having charge points, not just as John said, not having the street lamps sort of trailing wires across, but how we can do that with minimum disruption to pedestrians. So we are very conscious of that in our work. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rice.
I've got a few questions on it. Is this going to be a private company then that owns these sockets, and so residents will be paying whatever the private company charges? Is that correct? And is there any possibility of owning these sockets ourselves and connecting it to our own electricity supply?
As Councillor Hadley was just saying, that there is a possibility of gully charges. So that will be a gully cut into the footway, so residents can use their own supply.
Yeah, that would go into somebody's house. Yeah, I'm talking about the electricity that supplies the lamp posts. Well, I suppose we pay it. It just seems that that we're going to be reliant on private companies and whatever they charge. But okay. In terms of where we're deciding where to put them, I don't particularly, electric vehicles, I assume, are being bought by the higher earner and used by a higher earner. So my concern is about transport inequality. Obviously, this funding is not coming from the council, it's coming from the government. So there's not much that I can do about that. But are we even considering how we are going to use this money to reduce transport inequality? So it's going to be used in areas that don't have private driveways. So that sounds as if it's going the right way. But for example, have we looked at electric car share in areas that and being able to support that using this money so that it's cheaper and not just that can be used by higher deprivation areas.
I was just going to come in. Obviously, it's a very interesting debate about the electric vehicle charges, but this was really just one line in a report linked to the whole capital programme. Yes, but it's this was sort of approved at council last January, and it was approved as part of a public electric vehicle infrastructure strategy. So all that debate was kind of undertaken last January. There's no reason why we can't revisit it once we've got the award through, and perhaps we could prepare a separate item on it. But it's really probably going a bit off piste today, I would suggest.
Is there no opportunity to influence any of the implementation of that money?
Thank you. Councillor Hatter.
Yeah, just to, again to add the first investment that John was talking about in terms of the 5 rapid charges, we are looking at car club opportunities and how we can move to more electric cars as part of the car club fleet, and that's the route for people to use car sharing. And I'm really keen that we do what we can to improve that offer, because I think it is about if you're renting a car rather than having to own one, then you're going to make transport choices based on the journey you need to undertake.
Councillor Rice.
So I would have thought the low voltage could be used for a car club as well. Oh, right. Okay. Fine.
Yeah. So just to clarify, when this was first conceived, the whole idea of Levi, the council actually submitted a sort of different proposal that was initially rejected by central government for the £1.447 million. We've had to adjust our proposal during the course of the year to basically conform with the requirements. They're seeking volume and low voltage or kilowattage charges, as opposed to our original intent, which was to sort of create more mobility hubs. And we are still trying to steer our Levi funding as much as we can towards that. So we are very much trying to work with our car club providers to make sure that we get, electric chargers in those car club locations to try and, encourage it to install more electric car club vehicles across BCP. Similarly, we're looking at also where we've got charge points, whether we can get in bike share bays, etc. And, their proximity to bus stops, all those types of things, to try and make everything more integrated.
Thank you. I just had one question, sort of yes or no, really. Are there measures in place to stop, or will there be measures in place to stop sort of bay hogging or prevent non-electric cars parking in charging bays?
As far as bays in car parks are concerned, anybody occupying the bay still has to pay for parking, so that kind of solves that problem. When we start to put them in residential streets, there will be no restrictions on who can park there, and the anticipation is that local residents will, work together to make sure that those with electric vehicles can access a charge point and will be prepared to move vehicles. I mean, once a vehicle is fully charged, it might only need to be charged, say, once a week or even less, depending on its use. So it's not as if it has to be on that charging bay all of the time.
Thank you. Boris.
Can any of the money be spent on engaging with residents to improve communication through a scheme? So, for example, it could be combined with, like I know Green Road in Poole, lack mostly on-street parking, maybe, quite dense population. They already struggle with car parking spaces, and we had a discussion a year ago with residents about using an app whereby residents could not need to buy a second vehicle because they are able to share a vehicle that is owned by somebody on the street, but they put it onto this app and then people can use that app to register and borrow it for 2 hours or borrow it for a weekend. But it requires sort of a bit of time put in to get residents coming together, explaining the app and that type of thing. Is there any resource that could be done to, because it would be great if there was an electric vehicle that was then able to be shared with residents through this app. And so I can just see some sort of synergy. Is that possible, using that funding?
There's no resource allocated specifically for apps or communication. However, we've only just gone out to tender, so we've no idea who will be the successful supplier. We are expecting the supplier to also invest significantly in this programme, and that's certainly something we can talk to them about, how they will be engaging with local residents to ensure that there's maximum use of these chargers. So that's certainly something we could talk to them about.
Yeah, so the app wouldn't cost anything, just to clarify. That's all done through whoever uses the car. But that'd be really interesting. It would just be a matter of them allocating some staff time to think about it.
Like I say, I'm happy to explore that outside of what's happening with the electric vehicles anyway, because it doesn't have to be restricted to electric vehicles. That could be for any sort of vehicle type, couldn't it? So as part of John's area as sustainable transport policy manager, we can certainly go away and look at that as part of a behavioural change piece.
Go to Trent.
Yeah, on a different subject, because highways maintenance is listed there, and I've been made aware and become aware myself of some comparatively recent work failing quite early on in its life, and I wonder whether we actually are looking at the effectiveness of the various ways of surface treating roads. I'll give you an example. Cranbrook Road in Newtown was done fairly recently. It wasn't that long ago it was done, but the top 2 inches of the surface is breaking away all over the place. It's as if that it never really stuck properly to what was underneath. And so obviously a fair bit of money was spent on doing that, but it's going to need redoing quite soon, even though it was done quite recently. And I had a resident contact me about that, and he's absolutely right. It's sort of, he thinks it hasn't been done for years, but it has. And we do seem to have a problem with some of the work that's been done that doesn't seem to be holding and lasting very long. And I wonder whether we're actually doing a bit of active monitoring of the quality of our servicing work, because I'm not convinced that it's giving us good value for money if we're spending less and having to do it again after 2 or 3 years or something. It worries me, that does.
Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, my engineering colleagues aren't here today that oversee the structural maintenance element of the programme, but they very much do go out and check and inspect, obviously, at the time, the quality of what's going down. They test it. and they, do revisit it, ensure what, that the councils are basically achieving best value. I'm not sure what else I can say on that really at this meeting, other than perhaps going away and getting a one-sider from them to explain the process that they follow.
Yeah, it's just that this would have looked fine at the time. If you did a post-work inspection, it would have looked fine. But what's happened is it's almost like paint flaking off, except it's 2 inches of road surface flaking off, and it actually creates a very bad road surface. And it's actually embarrassing to know how recent that was done. I can't remember exactly when it was done, but it was fairly recent. And to actually see it fail so soon makes me think, are we getting value for money? So it's not just monitoring it when the work's done, but it's monitoring it over a period of time to see what's working and what's not working. Because I think it's actually quite important that we get good value for money when we do this work.
So if we could ask for that one-sider from the engineering team, they can show the process and what they do in terms of inspections after it's been laid. That would be helpful. Councillor Hadley.
Thank you. Yeah, just for clarity, that it is quite a completely separate team to Richard's team. So the engineering team is under Rhys Bright, and it might be useful actually if Rhys came with a presentation. There was a question to full council last night, which I answered, which talked a bit about the inspection regime, the yearly inspection regime for safety, and for minor roads, the 4 yearly reviews of all roads. So we do have a regime in place that does look at maintenance on an ongoing basis. It is disappointing to hear about that, and I suppose that is about, it's not one that come to me in terms of a challenge we need to know when people see those sorts of examples. But they will have the records of, as I say, in that case probably a 4 yearly inspection, and also the records of when the surface was put down, which contractor was used, whether there's any guarantees, because that's the other thing. If we leave it too long, then any guarantee from the contractor that put it down will have expired. So the sooner those sorts of problems are raised, the better. Thank you.
Yeah, I know, Chair, at the time a lot of this work was done, I had to get sort of officers out, and some of it, and in some areas, but that was a different surfacing job, was actually redone under guarantee, sort of 12 months to 2 years after it was first done. So there have been sort of problems in the past, but this appears to be a different method and a different contractor. And it just kind of worries me that we might be, a bit like buying something which goes out of guarantee, and then you sort of suddenly realise that you can't do anything with it, and it's sort of 2 weeks out of guarantee or something.
Yeah, I think we're veering away from what we're looking at the moment. But thank you for that, Tony. We'll follow that up with Councillor McCormack.
Yeah. I'm going to talk about something else, but yeah, just on Tony's point about that. I think I had a road in my ward that was resurfaced using micro asphalt, I think it is. That's like the hot bitumen type. And I was a bit sceptical of it in the first place, but I think it was 1/3 of the cost of resurfacing that road. So then when you take into account maybe we might have to patch 1 or 2 potholes 2 or 3 years later, well, it was 1/3 of the cost to start with. So actually patching a couple of potholes here and there is, I don't know, you still have a cost saving there in the long term. I just wanted to ask a question about bridge maintenance. On there we've got £600,000. Around the conurbation we have a lot of bridges, including not just car bridges but footbridges, and it just seems that £600,000 is quite a small figure when you consider how many bridges we have around the conurbation, especially some real tricky ones over the other side of conurbation to where I'm based. Does that, if you take an example like the Twin Sails Bridge, if it was to fail, let's say a ram fails, is that taken out of that 600,000? Because I'm pretty sure one of those rams is probably half of that budget in one go. So I'm guessing, I don't actually know the figure, but I just...
Councillor Hadley.
Again, that's in the engineering team. I'm sure Richard would come up with an answer, but it's not really fair on him because it's not his area. So as I understand it, that's about the inspection regime, making sure that they're safe, and any minor repairs. It wouldn't cover a major issue around the Twin Sails Bridge. We do actually have a current piece of work looking at the my friend's changing around. Looking at the Twin Towers Bridge, which is looking to strategic sale. So effectively, if we identify major work needing to be done, it would need to be a bid into government. We have looked at bids for some of the road things. We were talking just before the meeting about the railway infrastructure and whether that's ours or the railway company's a responsibility to look at. But that again sits under Reece Bright. So I think it would be really useful to try and make sure we have someone from engineering in these meetings going, certainly for these sorts of things.
Councillor Farr.
I was just looking down the a bit further down here with the public transport alternatives to the car. With in the grey column here, we've got national passenger transport information. I just wonder what that's actually paying for. It says £25,000. Page 11.
Mr. Chairman, if I may answer that one. Yes, that's our contribution to the National Public Transport Information Service, which initially was all about a call centre, and you could ring the travel line number, and there'd be people at the other end of the phone. That still exists, but obviously the majority of people now are able to access via a smartphone or the computer online journey planning. But it's essentially our contribution to a journey planning service that it used to be just the Southwest, but it's now a national service. So it's the council's contribution, along with lots of other councils as well, of course.
Councillor Rice.
I never put my microphone on. For Alistair, I was wondering what the £50,000 for the casualty reduction measures is.
So that allocation is effectively for the officers to review the cluster sites, the accident cluster sites around the conurbation, and then identify measures that could overcome those cluster sites. So effectively, if there's, when I describe a cluster site for other councillors, it's whether there's been 5 or more accidents within or is it 7? I can't remember. It's 5 or 7 accidents within the last 3 years period, effectively in that area, that are serious in nature.
And my second question is, do we know how much the I don't know if they were all over Christchurch and Bournemouth, but certainly in Poole we have quite a lot of electronic large screens saying don't drink and drive, and please drive carefully. I was wondering how much they cost. Do we have that anywhere?
I can't obviously give you a cost here and now of how much they've all costed over the years to install them. They're called variable message signs. Their primary purpose is obviously if there's incidents or accidents on the network to inform people to divert, and also if we've got any major works planned, in terms of for example, if a utility company was going to excavate an area and there's going to be congestion, we would use them for that purpose as well. Obviously in and around the Poole Bridge system, the Twin Cells Bridge and Poole Bridge, they're used to alert residents as to when the bridges are either raised, so they have to go down the alternative route, etc. In terms of the campaign, it's interesting you raised that, because the police have actually thanked us at Christmas. There were quite a lot of people that called the police using 999 when they identified that there were drink drivers in front of them, and they've obviously successfully prosecuted people thanks to that messaging and was being up and prompting the public to phone that number, which is quite reassuring.
Any other questions, members? Councillor Rice.
With regards to the highways maintenance, is there any effort within the criteria questionnaires that are done to decide whether it's a priority scheme or not, on specifically two-wheeled users of that highway, so scooters or bicycles or electric bike users, and mobility users? Is that adequately, it might be assessed. So, for example, a pothole that could cause the death of a scooter rider or a cyclist if they came off and got knocked by a car driver. In terms of assessing that, that's much more severe than a car driving over a pothole and feeling a little bump. So I was just wondering whether what I'm wanting is that is a significant amount of money that is in road maintenance. Is any of it prioritized towards ensuring a safer journey for people that are on scooters or bicycles or mobility scooters?
Well, obviously, in terms of there's two elements. This is the capital fund. There's obviously a revenue fund entirely separate from this, which neighbourhood services utilise to infill potholes and repair our roads. Obviously, there's a report it system online. If any resident, any cyclist, pedestrian, car user reports any defect on the network, it's inspected by a local inspector. They'll go out and they'll try and repair it or make it safe as soon as practically possible. So in terms of the resurfacing programme, obviously they're resurfacing the entire width of the road, where generally when they're resurfacing stretches of road, so that's going to cover people that are either potentially cycling, scooting, or trying to walk across the road. What I would note is that obviously that's on the kind of the actual surface itself. So some of the things that might be helpful to set some context. When we are resurfacing roads, we've got the forward programme set out, so that will be shared with our colleagues in active travel and sustainable transport. So they will review and see if any amendments can be made to lining, etc., or whether there's some drop curbs, for example, that would be helpful to people that have been registered through our correspondence to us. So we'll try and improve. You might recall several years ago we were successful with the Challenge Fund, and all up Wimborne Road in Poole, for example, we resurfaced the carriageway, but actually put the cycle lanes back differently to how they were previously. We did the same in Blandford Road in Poole as well, where there used to be two lanes on the approach to the junction with, I've forgotten the name of the road now, but it's right near the bottom end of Blandford Road. And effectively we've reduced that down to a single lane to widen the cycleway. So we will, review what we're doing as part of that resurfacing programme. And the same for the traffic signal maintenance as well, for example, where we're going across now the town. If we're refreshing kit at a junction, if there's a need for pedestrians to be able to cross at that junction and there's no push button facility, we are around retrofitting those crossing facilities as well. So we're doing everything we can to improve the environment for pedestrians and cyclists and scooter users, etc.
But I'm just wondering whether there is a way of prioritising road resurfacing where cyclists are documenting issues as opposed to, like, when we, I don't know whether it is relevant or not, but it's what I was thinking about on the way cycling here. Like in terms of when somebody reports it on the council website, do we ask whether they're going over it on a bicycle or not, for example? Do we distinguish that? Because if we don't, then we can't prioritise.
Councillor Hadley.
Yeah, I think the point that I would make is that we need to think about all road users and the safety impact and actually the mode of which people. I mean, it is important, particularly for scooters, because they have small wheels, that they're more likely to come off because going over an uneven part of the road. But as Richard said, the inspectors will go out and assess, and we're trying to move to the in-cab technology, which will allow the crews to do that directly. So actually cutting out steps and making our process more efficient in terms of identifying what needs to happen and ensuring we can get to the permanent repair. Because the immediate repair, and again, it's not well understood by the public. The immediate repair is to put some stuff in there just to fill the hole, to prevent further damage or further damage to vehicles or injury particularly to more vulnerable road users. And often those potholes will appear where there's a lot of traffic or where there's heavy traffic, so where the buses are going over it or where there's a lot of vehicles going over it. So it will affect both modes. I'm not sure it's actually it's important in terms of that ability to throw someone off if they're on two wheels and on motorbikes as well. But I think it's actually not necessarily going to change the way in which we try and deal with it, which is whatever the mode, to deal with it as quickly as we can.
Okay, members, if there's no further questions or comments, we've been asked to recommend to Council the approval of the 25-26 Local Transport Plan Capital Programme, and to delegate the delivery of the Active Travel Fund 5 grant to the Director of Planning and Transport in consultation with Councillor Hadley.
Sorry, Chair. The role of this committee is to advise Cabinet. So this is a Cabinet report. So those recommendations are for Cabinet to make to Council. I think the issue for you is if there are recommendations or suggestions that you want to make in advance of the Cabinet meeting.
Of course. Thank you, Councillor Hadley. Councillor Rice.
I would just like to clarify, I missed the beginning, but it seems as if most of this stuff is set in stone, and we haven't got any option for really advising Cabinet to make any adjustments. So I appreciate that that's how it has arrived at the committee. So I was just going to say that I'm going to abstain, really, because I don't feel that this has come to us early enough to have any real input into anything, which is fine. But I'm hoping in the future we'll be able to see things earlier. But if there are things that we can change, then or that you would like advice on, the transport team, then that's fine.
I think there's an opportunity for us to make comment and send suggestions or recommendations to the Cabinet to consider when they're looking at it. I don't think we're here to do more than that.
But is there anything that we can recommend? If it's all been worked up and all the funding's been received for specific things, that's what I'm wondering. I suppose we could recommend the car share app is looked at, but I don't know whether that's really linked to this report.
So I'm happy to take that car share app away from that. That's not something we would probably invest capital in. That's more of a kind of revenue activity for officers to link and look at the opportunities and explore what that is. And then obviously if there is a capital need for investment to enable that, then we could potentially identify some funding for that at a later stage. This is obviously the capital allocation from the Department for Transport, which arrives at us annually, and this is a recommendation from the officers, as it were, in terms of how we would recommend that money is invested during 2025-2026, and this is the platform and your opportunity to, having reviewed the paper, to advise if you think it should be allocated in a different way, ahead of Cabinet, who will then ultimately make their decision as to whether or not they recommend to Council or not whether to approve it.
Councillor Trent.
Yeah, perhaps we actually need to put down what's been raised. There's about 3 or 4 things that have been raised, and maybe that should actually be in writing as a comment from this group. We've heard about the electric car charging points, and although we've been reassured that it is going to look after the most disadvantaged users and so on. But I think the fact that it was raised and, we showed concern about it. And the potholes, I think Councillor Rice's point about looking at potholes, particularly the ones that are a danger to cyclists and those on two wheels, that point's been made. I think it's quite valid to make that point sort of further. And I made the point about monitoring the long-term effectiveness of different road surface treatments to make sure that we are getting a long life and value for money. I think if something's actually put in writing that this is what we commented on during it, even though we haven't suggested any changes to this programme. I think that would be the way forward.
So are members happy if I send that across the cabinet, some notes from what we've all said, from the points raised? Councillor Rice.
It's not a criticism. The reason I'm raising it is because we've done a lot of work in overview and scrutiny. I'm on both of the other overview and scrutinies, and I never really found it very useful when information came to the committee relatively close to cabinet, because it was sort of definitely the majority of people in overview and scrutiny want to be able to influence the work right at the early stages, a year or two before it's coming through. So it's just about transport. Obviously are used to coming to this, and it's just about explaining that probably most of us want to do things a little bit differently from what may have happened certainly 5 years ago when I was on TAG before. So if we could note to Cabinet as well that we are looking to see transport schemes when we can influence them at the early stages.
Councillor Hadley.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if it helps, but this obviously is the intended way in which we're going to spend the money that comes down to us from Department of Health over the next year. And there is an opportunity for the stuff that's in the grey boxes, particularly to say this is the allocation that's being recommended to us as cabinet. This committee can influence that. But subsequent to that, in terms of the future work plan and future transport advisory groups, there may be items that you want to delve into on this list in detail. And we've heard about the long-term issue about whether the investment we're making in resurfacing roads actually is what is our means for dealing with that. And I've tried to give an answer, but actually having the officers to tell you the detail, this would be the forum to delve into that in some detail and understand that fully and be satisfied with it. So perhaps, and the other bit of that, I suppose, is that this is a rolling programme. So very much the start point of it is that there is money allocated to each of these topics, which we can flex to a degree. There is a 70-30 split between maintenance and new things in terms of the money in those grey boxes. So it's the 30% we've got more chance perhaps to say, actually, we think we should be doing a bit more of this and a bit less of that. So I don't think this is the only opportunity to debate and influence the outcome of how this money gets spent. But it is the opportunity to say, actually, the budget that Richard and Rhys are going to work to on for the year ahead is based on this allocation once it's gone through Cabinet and Council.
Thank you. Any questions on that, members? Okay. So are we happy that we move on? Thank you. So the next item is item 7, the bus service improvement plan.
So again, this is a paper that's due to be presented at Cabinet next week. The report recommends acceptance of the grant, and obviously what that means is effectively the grant value from the Department for Transport for the bus service improvement plan is over £1 million, so it has to go through Council for approval to be accepted. So the initial recommendation from Cabinet to Council is accepting the money from the Department for Transport for the period 2025-2026. It also then recommends to Council that the delivery of the BCP programme is developed in conjunction with the Enhanced Bus Partnership Board. The Enhanced Partnership Board. So that's a board that's been established. Every authority nationally has had to establish an Enhanced Bus Partnership effectively to be eligible to receive Bus Service Improvement Plan grant. So the delegation is to do that in consultation with the Service Director for Planning and Transport and with the relevant portfolio holder, which is Councillor Hadley, which is portfolio holder for Climate Mitigation, Energy and Environment. And then the third recommendation is Cabinet agrees and recommends to Council a full review of all subsidised local bus service contracts ahead of the planned commencement of the withdrawal of the bus subsidy budget starting in 2026-2027. So it's a mixed report, this one. So obviously previously, historically, the council's been awarded 8.8 million, nearly 8.9 million pounds worth of BCP grant, and this is the follow-on allocation from that. So the DfT has really supported us and backed us as a authority, which is really welcomed. The money that's been granted to us, the 5.7 million, is made up of 3.2 million pounds worth of capital, 2.3 million pounds worth of revenue, and £94,000 worth of capacity funding. So that's obviously to help us fund the officer time, for example, to oversee the investment of the grant. There's also what's called a bus service operators grant, which is also paid to local authorities support tendered bus services, and that amounts to 294,000. So in reality, it takes the total allocation to just over 6 million, albeit the approval in this report that's being sought is for the 5.722 million pounds. The report sets out in its appendices recommendations for how the both the revenue and the capital grant is invested. And so yeah, that's set out. I'm just trying to find the page that's relevant for you. Also on the pack that you've got, it's page 25. And then page 26 is so 25 is the capital recommendation and 26 is the revenue recommendation. So effectively what we're seeking is acceptance of the grant, approval to accept the grants is the first recommendation. The second one is delegating approval, obviously, to the EP board in consultation with the portfolio holder to deliver effectively what's set out in Appendix 2 and under the capital and the revenue schedule. And then the third element is a review of our subsidised bus services, because in our medium-term financial planning as part of budget setting, there is a proposed withdrawal of £800,000 worth of revenue. Indicatively, it's over 800,000. Sorry, I'll just get the exact number for completeness. £850,000 over a 2-year period. Now, we've discussed this with the Department for Transport because it seems at odds that we're being allocated large, substantial sums of revenue grant, but also at a time when we're potentially having to withdraw services potentially because of a reduction in budget. So as to basically offset that, we've had conversations with the Department for Transport, and they've agreed that if we review our network to ensure that it's absolute value for money in future years, through adjustment, we should be able to potentially use the future years BCP grant in effect to almost replicate the reduction in localised revenue grant.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Councillor Trent.
Yeah, it's a general point, because I do think that what's going to matter in this is the detail, and I'm a great believer in making buses available to people, who need them most. And it does rather worry me about the removal of subsidy, because a lot of time and effort is put in getting people out of their cars and onto public transport and onto cycling and walking. And it does worry me that we could be undermining that if we, start pulling the plug on supported bus services. And I think Cabinet needs to think very carefully about that and to look at the priorities. There's quite an interesting list of things which I don't disagree with anything of on the last page. Unfortunately, this thing doesn't seem to go up to 26, it finishes at 22. Although it does say 26 to 26 on the thing, but it says page 22 on it, so I can yeah I can see. But I think it's important that we do protect the availability of buses to our residents, particularly the old and vulnerable people, the people who kind of live, and I was having a chat earlier on actually about, you know, one particular route where people are basically trapped with steep hills everywhere around them, and there's lots of old people there that, you know, haven't really got many other alternatives, and dial-a-bus doesn't really sort of work. In fact, I think it would be a more expensive service, but I do think we need to protect it and look very carefully at what is supported. I like the idea on this list, and, you know, albeit it's going into detail, the reintroduction of Service 11, and this time to serve Camford Paddock. And I think we might be able to find ways of using some of these to pick up some of the routes that sort of disappeared. But I know that in the past, more bus have been very helpful when there's been negotiations with them between the council and the bus company. And, you know, I hope work starts soon, and I really hope that we get a decent amount of input into it, because from a ward councillor point of view, wherever you represent, you know some of the issues in the locality and where the real vulnerability lies. And I do welcome the opportunity to have an input into the detail of this, because it is really important that we maintain that, because not everyone can get on a bicycle or walk somewhere. And, you know, I think that we really need to do the best we can to maintain the maximum access to bus transport for people. So, you know, it's just really a note of caution about C, that, you know, we don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot by going too far on that, because it may actually have unintended extra costs elsewhere.
Thank you, Tony. Dwayne.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted a bit of detail with the proposed route 11. Is that an old route that used to go? I'm trying to remember if that included Kinston, or I think some days it did include Kinston, some days it didn't. I remember it, you know, Seven Bearwood and going on to Poole, if I remember correctly. It's going back a few years now. I'm not quite sure. Thanks.
Yeah, just to say that this is there's no detail behind this yet. This is a list that's been drawn up in consultation with the bus operator. We have the Enhanced Partnership Board meeting this afternoon, where there'll be further discussion. We haven't got detailed timetables put together yet, but I think Councillor Trent was correct in terms of some of these enhancements will help mitigate any impact of any changes to some of the supported network. But also we've got one eye on the new housing developments at Camford Paddock, and the other two developments off, you know, the other one off Magna Road and the one off Oakley Lane in Merley. And there is some developer funding available from those housing developments that will help support enhanced bus services in the future. So it's kind of working towards that. But as I say, we don't have detailed timetables available to share at this point, but I'm certainly happy to do that when we have those available.
Yes, it'd be interesting to see what the route is, if it's an old route that's being brought back, or if it's like completely, you know, a different one. But it also mentions about 5 and 5A changes there, and 6 and 6A. I just wonder if it'll mean a longer route for those who use the 5 and 5A if it's going out further, because it's already quite a long route, to be honest, when it goes through Winton and Charminster. If it did include Bearwood as well, it would be a very, very long route. Thanks.
Councillor McCormick.
I think I already kind of know the answer to this question, but the Purewell bus priority, that idea brought forward by the bus company. I think that's in consultation with the bus company, because when I first saw that appear in the public domain, the Purewell bus priority idea. I was really surprised because I've been on that bus 1,000 times, and I am right. There is a slight problem there. If you were to score it out of 10, you're talking a 3 out of 10 issue. Do you know what I mean? There's a problem there, but it's not a big problem. But then there's a massive problem every Monday when there's the Monday market and the bus is blocking an entire lane, causing huge amount of traffic all the way through Christchurch. So it was almost like that idea, we're addressing a really small idea, a really small issue within this programme in Purewell, but completely ignoring a huge issue, just a stone throws away every Monday. And I was wondering, during those consultations, did the bus company ever come forward and say, oh, actually, on Mondays we cause a big issue over here, but we would actually like you to solve an issue over here that we've got? Because it seems to me that we've got a scheme on here which isn't a really big issue, but we've completely missed a huge issue just down the road. And I was just wondering where these ideas came from on this list.
So, obviously, thank you for sharing your concerns about Purewell. The Purewell, we'll come on to that later on the agenda anyway, under the TRO items. That's obviously part of the existing programme that's coming through. I must admit, I've never had that issue identified to myself, and it's not been flagged in any of the meetings. What we do is we do a review of the bus routes. The bus company obviously look at where they've got the delays on the machines. They can see where their service is delayed, and we're trying to help them to speed up those journey times or make those journeys more reliable in terms of more consistent, so their timetabling is correct. There's conversations obviously with our network management team as well, in terms of they identify where there's issues on the network in terms of movement of all modes relative to the buses as well, and safety issues. But effectively it's all done through the enhanced bus partnership. There is a list of priority locations where buses are held up, and obviously where the buses are held up, that's a bit of bus journey time that can't be spared somewhere else on the network. So we're trying to iron that out.
I guess the issue I'm trying to point out is that we do these things in consultation with the bus companies, and the bus companies will tell you what problems that they are having, but they're not also telling you the problems that they are causing. And that's the two contrasting things. In Purewell, they have a problem because they're not getting through their buses through as quickly, but they're not telling you about the problem that they're causing when the Monday market is on and all the traffic is backing up. And I guess what I'm trying to say here is we probably need some motorist input during these consultations at the same time to give the other side of the coin at that stage, if that makes sense.
Well, I mean, I get, the consultation's open to all members of the public, so anybody can reply to it. But I guess what you're putting at is once the idea is conceived. But obviously nothing is set in stone, and that's why it's open to consultation. There's obviously a consultation that's been in progress, and nothing's been decided yet.
The point I'm making is that we've got a consultation for the Purewell bus issue, but we don't have a consultation or even on the agenda for the issue in every Monday when the Monday market's on. Do you see what I mean? It's kind of one-sided on the bus company because they're being consulted, but the motorists and other road users aren't being consulted, the problems that the buses are causing.
Councillor Hadley, did you want to come in on this?
Yeah, I think that's a really valid point. And I think part of that is about where ward councillors, we need to make sure that as our part of our discussion in the bus quality partnership, that we are feeding in the issues about, obviously, again, Richard's team manage the network, so they are trying to do what they can for congestion as a whole. One of the areas around the bus partnership is about the inability for a bus to get to the raised platform. So that's about disabled passengers being able to get on board, or people with pushchairs. And so sometimes some of those parking spaces are just so they can actually get to the bus stop to be able to deliver their passengers to the right place or get them in on and off easily. But I think the impact across the network, some of that is about, the bus company have done a number of things to try and speed up the boarding process, so that the apps and things, it is about not dwelling at the stop, which again does not create such a backlog. But the all of these measures will need to be consulted, and a part of the balancing act, I suppose, we're doing is the MTFP, for the reasons you know that have been rehearsed all over the place. We have to make changes. What we're hoping to do is to talk actively to the company about what can be made commercial and carried forward, but actually feeding in those concerns about other road users is an important strand of that as well.
I was just going to say, more than happy to look at the Monday market issue, but obviously it's not been flagged by, as far as I'm aware, having consulted with the ward councillors as part of that proposal before it's gone out. That's not, as far as I'm aware, been raised as an issue.
I can supply some dash cam footage. If I'll have to delete the audio off it first, though.
Councillor Rice.
Yeah, so with regards to the papers, it finishes on page 22, is that correct? Sorry? Yeah. Because they're only the capital ones, the revenue ones haven't got a cost against them, have they? Is that correct? Am I reading the report?
So they should all be on there. So there should be page 21, which is page 25 of the PDF, is the capital. So there's a table where
okay,
which
the second one
goes
is
to
revenue.
3.2 million.
Yeah,
And then there's a revenue table below that on page 22, which is 26 of the PDF, which is total revenue.
Yeah. Cool. So on the revenue table then, there isn't anything to do with, it's not very much to do with children getting to and from school. But then in the paper, there is something written about the new Young Child Person's 30-day app. Has that just been missed off the table? I'm wondering how much it's costing. And it was raised in full council yesterday about the issue of children's health and smartphones, and only being able to access the discounted ticket via an app as opposed to being able to actually just buy one. Like a £300, £260 difference or something like this.
So in the revenue table, there is an item which is unlimited journeys for a day, Saturday or Sunday, for young people under 19 for £2. That's the discounted weekend young person.
That's different.
Day
isn't it?
rider. I'm not suggesting that's for...
Yeah, but that's not for going to school, is it?
No, that isn't for going to school.
Councillor Hadley, you want to come in?
I first the answer I just gave actually is, in terms of boarding the buses, it's something that Vicky Slade, when she was leader, and I were raising with the bus company in terms of children's fares and the fact that it was more than the £2 fare for a child. And was there anything that the bus company could do to make that better? And their response was to implement this. And as they said, £65,000 of tickets sold so far. But as I understand it, we didn't subsidise that. So it doesn't appear within our BCP as money that we put in, because it was something the bus company undertook to do just as part of their operation. So it was a commercial offer. So they, where they were using the app, they recognised the value to them as well. And they reduced the price. I think that's right. Officers might correct me on that.
Yeah, I was just going to say this. That's already in place. Sorry, that's the bit that was throwing me. Apologies. Do you want to come in, John? You can.
Chairman, under the current BCP funding, not for next year, under the current one, we introduced a new child 30-day and 90-day period ticket, which is for children, which is doing very well. 700 tickets sold since last summer, £65,000 value. So there was a gap in the ticket offer for young people from Mobus, and we've been able to use existing BCP revenue funding to provide that additional period ticket to support school travel.
So we did subsidise that. And how much
that is subsidised through the BCP
wave of BCP.
Yeah,
grant.
and how much was the subsidy?
£65,000 at the time. Well, it's probably a little bit more than that, but £65,000 in the first 6 months.
And are we going to continue that? Because that's not in the next year's revenue.
There's no proposal to continue it through use of BCP funding. what we need to establish is whether, and I don't know the answer to it, I'm afraid, whether Moorbus are prepared to continue with that on a commercial basis. The idea of some of this funding is to pump prime commercial initiatives. We can discuss that at this afternoon's board meeting and get an answer from them there.
And I suppose just looking at this data, it would be useful to know how much £65,000 of our funding has subsidised the tickets. If it's only like 1% of the ticket, you can imagine, okay, they're going to carry it on. But if it's 70% of the cost of all the tickets, you can imagine there's an issue there. So it'd be useful from our point of view, in terms of interpreting the information we're given, to know the percentage of subsidy for when this comes back again.
Okay, I'll go to Councillor Hadley first. Thank you. Councillor Keddy.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you,
You're on
committee.
mute, I think. We can't hear you.
Am I? I'm not muted this end.
Still can't hear you.
I have my mic. I do have my mic. Hold on. The mic is on this end. No.
Maybe log out and log back in.
Okay.
Is
I
your
will
speaker
try
off
logging
from
out.
yesterday's meeting, maybe? You've volumes.
No.
No.
Okay, give me 5.
Yes, if you can type it in, we can.
While he's trying to solve his technical problems, I mean, sorry, just to be clear, and perhaps I wasn't clear when I introduced this item earlier. So Appendix 1 actually sets out what we've been investing the 22 to 23 to 24 to 25 BCP grant in, and some of the sort of success like we've had, obviously, with live streaming, CCTV from 250 bus shelters to the council control room, which has helped increase security for passengers who've obviously had the new RTI display totems in Poole. We've put in 50 new real-time passenger information displays, 10 new bus shelters with accessible boarding. Obviously, Southbourne and Purewell bus priority schemes are in progress, which we've obviously touched on by Councillor McCormick. Westbourne bus priority, so there's a trial on the gyratory at the moment at Westbourne to help make it safer for buses and easier for buses to pull out onto the gyratory and for general traffic overall. We've also undertaken some traffic signal works on Branksome and Poole Road at the Bourne Valley junction to improve priority. There's also been bus priority installed at 65 signalised junctions, so that's just the technology in behind that call carries for buses that are behind schedule. And then there's the Bournemouth Station to Town Centre bus priority route, which has obviously been out to public engagement and is in progress at the moment as well. So there's lots of work that's going on with that existing BCP programme. We've been advised that we can carry forward grant that's been unspent into the current year, and also this current grant that's been awarded for 25-26, provided proposals are committed to, the capital element can be carried forward into 26-27. So that we're going to need to do that anyway. I think government have recognised that, and like you've rightly pointed out, the need for engagement. You can't just throw these things in. You actually need to go out, seek the views of the public through engagement, and then consult on the options before you make any changes. So that's the whole premise of the programme.
Councillor Trent.
Yeah, looking at the last page, well, 26 to 26, you've got flat fare in Zone A after 6 p.m. for £1 at a estimated revenue cost of £661,000. That is the most significant lump on that list, and I'm wondering whether if it were 150 rather than £1, whether that would actually make it a little bit more affordable. That's a lot of money for one initiative. I'm not sure where Zone A begins or ends or anything like that, but I'm kind of wondering whether, it's a bit like the £2 bus fare nationally that's been changed to £3. That's quite a dramatic increase, but it was found that the £2 was obviously costing a fair bit of money. Personally, I would have put it up to £2.50 rather than £3. But this, I'm wondering whether we're starting, if this is starting this year. As I say, I don't know whether this is a completely new scheme, but if we're starting it this year, starting it for £1 sounds, lovely as a promotional thing, but the moment that you find, oh, this is unaffordable and you've got to put it up, then that becomes quite dramatic. Whereas if it starts at, say, 150, maybe we should ask Cabinet to look at that as because we are talking about revenue, and it's quite a lot of revenue for one particular scheme.
Is that you, John? Do we know how we came to that figure? Was the receipts?
Yes, Chairman. First of all, Councillor Trent, Zone A, that's the Moorbus ticket Zone A, mirrors the BCP Council boundary. So it's the same as the BCP area. It didn't used to be, but we managed to get that changed last year. The estimated cost of this, and it is just an estimate, is based on the current £3 capped fare and making that fare £1 and making up the difference, of course, so based on existing journeys. And one of the reasons why we've introduced, or we're proposing introducing a cheap evening fare is quite a few of our subsidised bus services operate in the evening. So it's about using this, this next year, before we make any changes to that supported network, using this year to build up patronage and hopefully ease some of them more towards commercial operation. So that's why it was felt appropriate to come in at that low level. There was a little bit of nervousness from the bus company about how much it would cost, and it may indeed cost more than 661,000. Depends on on take up. But all I can say is, if we do feel that we're going to run out of money, then there is the opportunity to adjust it. But also noting what you've Councillor Trent has said about what happened when the national fares cap went from £2 to £3. It's quite a jump. So maybe we would look to have less of a change if a change was indeed required.
So just to say, my instinct would be to start it a little bit higher than that, but I do appreciate the attractiveness of the £1 flat fare. I think that's quite an attractive offer. But if it's an offer we can't afford, then and it's better to come in at a sort of a more realistic, sustainable amount than sort of have something which is really sort of attractive and so on, but it's losing a massive amount of money. And I do appreciate that if it actually gets some of the subsidised routes being used more, but then if we're subsidising it to that level, then I'm not totally convinced that it's the best thing to do. But
Councillor Farr.
Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to ask about the future of Route 36. I can't see it mentioned on the list. Are you able to confirm if that's no longer being subsidised, or is it successful without needing to be subsidised? Thanks. 36.
Route 36 is an existing subsidised service. It will be reviewed as part of the full subsidised network review. No decisions have been made. There will be an opportunity for members to debate and consider proposals following that review, which will include the 36, but it's just one of 23 subsidised services at the moment.
Councillor Trent.
Yeah. 36 is quite an interesting one because it actually, it runs through one end of my ward, and it's a peculiar one because it goes from one area to another via central Bournemouth, and but it gives the one bus that covers Glenfurniss Avenue, and I wonder whether to help the decision making or the recommendation making process in that there's a study as to what parts of that route get used and so on, because I think there may be a shorter route that would be profitable, and the possibility with some of the other subsidised bits that the diversion of existing routes might be a way round it. But it is an interesting route. It does hit lots of buttons, but it's a peculiar route as a whole route. So I think it needs to be monitored in sections to find out which bits are performing and which aren't performing. And then if the bits aren't performing, why are they not performing? Is it because they actually go to the wrong place or something?
I'm assuming that's all part of the review process in due course.
Absolutely, Chairman. Yes, I mean the 36 is one of those services that we're doing our best to serve as many people as possible who would otherwise not have a bus service. So it's one of those gap-filling subsidised services that operates during the daytime and provides essential connectivity for people who rely on it to get out and about. Yeah, we will be looking in detail at what the journey purpose is. We've just started to do some on-bus surveys to gather our information ahead of this full service review, and that includes how many passengers are travelling and what their purpose, how often they travel and what their journey purpose is. So that will be part of the review, certainly.
Thank you. Councillor Rice.
Yeah, I was just thinking about recommendations to Cabinet on this paper. Can we recommend that the bus company feed back to us about the paper versus app children's purchasing tickets thing?
I think we may have a question in the chat.
Oh, no. Great minds think alike.
So, Councillor Kelly, forgive me, I'm going to read out your words that you've put in the chat. Yesterday
Thank
evening
you.
at full council, we passed a motion to address the impact of smartphone use on children's wellbeing, education and safety. Barnet Council has recently worked with more than 120 of its schools to implement a smartphone ban. Moorbus offers its discounted children's bus passes by app only at this time. This has a side effect of incentivising smartphone use in children. Can the discounted children's bus passes be delivered outside of the app? Can TAG recommend this?
Thank
Just
you.
to clarify,
I'm not sure if you
Councillor
can
Rice,
hear me
that's
now.
the same point.
Yeah, that's the same point, but put much more eloquently.
So obviously, the advisory group can only make advice to Cabinet. Moorbus is a commercial operator. We're part of a partnership with Moorbus, so we can have that conversation with them. But obviously, we can't decide it because it's their product and it's their offer. But obviously, we have a say in whether or not we choose to fund that proposal or not in terms of them providing that discount. So we can certainly take it away and explore with them what the options could be. But I obviously can't speak on behalf of Moorbus here today.
Councillor Hadley.
Yeah, very happy to take that away. And I think one of the interesting things I think I raised at when we managed to get the discount with the app was that I was in St Malo and they had you could buy on the bus a smart card that was just as a bus travel card that you could use in the way you'd use a credit card, so that it's something you could give to children. You could load it up with money, give it to children to be able to use the bus. So without having a phone, because part of their argument was you can board quicker. Quite often children will have small change because they've been and bought sweets or done other things with the money, and what they've got is pieced together, and that slows the bus down significantly. So that was part of their equation in saying, yeah, we like the app, we don't want we can't give that discount for small change, because it was about trying to move people away from using cash. If we could persuade them to take a card, and of course they did have initially their own app and their own cards, and they've moved more towards the mainstream stuff. So that may be a solution. We can try and say, if not cash, then would you do something that doesn't involve a phone, which I think is behind the query that's been raised in council last night, and Councillor Kelly's raising now.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Kelly's nodding his acknowledgement of that, I think. Yeah, happy with that.
Just to clarify as well, obviously the existing offer, obviously the 30-day and 90-day tickets via the app for the the new child 30-90, that's obviously a product that's already out there. So we can ask about the product that's already out there, whether that can be available not via an app, and obviously if there's a future proposal we can ask about that. The only thing I would caveat is I suspect the operational cost would substantially increase, so there's a payoff with that. So just to put that out there, obviously if the Morbus are then suddenly in the business of having to produce a separate discount card, etc., then that's going to add a cost to it. So we might have to put more BCP subsidy into that specific item and be able to not fund as broad a spread of things. But obviously it's all up for conversation, and we're happy to take that away and present that to Morbus as an idea and follow it through. Is that helpful, Councillor? Yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Two things. So as TAG, can we ask if the Morbus company is not going to continue the 30-day and the 90-day ticket, and we haven't allocated, or Cabinet haven't allocated any funding to continue it, can we ask them to come back to TAG, or do we not have that power as TAG? Like overview and scrutiny can ask for external people to come in and speak to us. Is that something that we can do? I'm just concerned that this is going to...
Well, no, we can certainly invite Morbus to come and speak at a Transport Advisory Group.
Okay.
But
maybe we can think about that. If there's an issue with the ongoing of that, or if there's an issue with allowing them not to have it on an app. And the other question is really for adding to a work plan, is with regards to buying the tickets. I go to Barcelona a lot, and they have a very simple card that you can buy 10 journeys on, and you just tap it onto 2 points on the bus. You can either go in the middle or you can go at one end, and they can get 100 people onto a bus very quickly. You can't buy a ticket on the bus, but I don't know whether you can use an app on the bus, but certainly these tickets, everybody knows how to use them, like children, adults, elderly people. So just in terms of allocating future funding, and exploring the best way going forwards about if we're really serious about increasing bus patronage, smartphones do not seem to be the solution, particularly, or not the main solution. So I'm just wondering whether we could have a look at what other places are doing in the UK in terms of this issue, what other places in Europe are doing that have high bus patronage, so that we can allocate that in future years to maybe subsidising a switch in how tickets are purchased.
Chair, if I could just respond to say, well, first of all, around 30% of journeys are concessionary journeys with people using smart cards that my team have issued. So that covers almost a third of them, and they obviously, concessionary bus passes. So about 30% of journeys are with
declaring interest, haven't I?
with bus pass, and they just tap them on the ticket machine as they board. I think it's fair to say that if Morbus were here, they would be saying that their focus is very much on their app and their mobile phone ticketing is increasingly popular. There are mobile ticketing through their app. I travelled in this morning on the bus, and the majority of people were scanning their phones. That is a cheap way of doing it. Mobus do have their key card, which is a smart card, but as I understand it, they much prefer people to use the app because that's a more cost-effective ticketing solution for them. They clearly want to move away from paper tickets, which take longer to issue, and the cash handling as well, which is something that has got a cost to it for the bus operators, and as well as slowing down the bus. So we can certainly raise it with them, but I suspect that their response will be, encouraging people to use their app is very much their preferred business model.
Yeah, what I'm wondering is, like us as a council looking at other cities around the world that have really good public transport, and seeing whether they are just using an app, and like as councillors thinking, is this best for our residents? And if it is, then that's fine. We don't need to speak to more buses, space. But if it isn't, then we could get more bus in and say, look, we're concerned about this type thing.
I think it's a situation where they're there to make money. They're a private company, but we're a council here, and we want to look after all the residents and those that don't have smartphones or don't have the ability to get an app.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that they still accept cash. They still will take cash and issue a paper ticket, and there is a national fares cap in place that means that people pay no more than £3 for their ticket. So they will say that they are catering for people who wish to pay by different means. But in terms of their sort of most cost-effective business solution and fastest in terms of boarding, they are very much promoting their own app.
Yeah, absolutely. Councillor Trent.
Yeah, I was going to make exactly the same point that you've just made, Chair, and that's that there has to be an alternative all along to having a smartphone. I've witnessed a lot of people using smartphones, and it seems to be quite effective and seems to work all right, particularly younger people, and just sort of scan it. And I obviously use a bus pass because I'm ancient, but I think something like an Oyster card or equivalent, which I think is what was being described in Barcelona. It sounded very much like an Oyster card. You just, flash it and that's it, sort of thing. And, it doesn't have to go through the driver or anything. But I thought that technology was on more buses anyway, and that maybe as an alternative to the app, even if there's an initial cost to it, a bit like when we had a small working group looking at the idea of a residence card, if there were, even if you paid a little bit of cash for the card alternative to it, say £5 or something like that, but there does need to be something other than just the phone app. And, I think our local equivalent of something like the Oyster card would be ideal. And if we could get the railways involved in it as well, then I think that's the way forward. And I think there's something sort of in all of these lists that imply that something like that is being looked at. And so, I do think that we need to have a wide range of options, but certainly something that works on both the trains and the buses and so on, like the Oyster card works in London, is great. I think you can pay cash fare in London. Obviously, you don't want buses dwelling very long at stops there because it's really busy. But I think the flat fare is quite a bit more. So the flat fare would be equivalent of saying paying the full £3 when you might travel for £1.50 or something using the card. So I think that is quite important to make sure that we do have choice available.
I'm not an expert, but I think in on the London buses you can use your credit card or your debit card. The Oyster card is going out of fashion. I don't know if they still use it, but I do remember when they initially gave them, you paid a deposit or something to have it. But Yeah.
That is the same as well on the more buses around BCP. You can tap on and tap off with your debit card or credit card, but I appreciate obviously children aren't necessarily going to have a credit or debit card, hence the products, if they're discounted at the moment, are processed via an app. But obviously we say we can certainly take it away, discuss it with more bus, and obviously get them to come to a future meeting as required, if provided they're willing to. I can't speak for them. I think Councillor Keddy's come online and he said, if smart cards are already being used for concessionary bus passes, could that be extended to school children? Obviously, they're I think there's slightly different processes. I mean, John, you've got the equipment, haven't you, within your team for the concessionary fares? I don't know if you want to come in on that one.
I mean, there's no reason why we couldn't introduce a concessionary fare scheme for children, but bearing in mind the existing concessionary fare scheme has a budget of in excess of £7.3 million. It is big money, but the technology is there. But even that, I suspect, will at some point in the future move onto smartphones and will not be a physical card, or at least there'll be an option to have it on a smartphone, as more and more older people are getting are tech savvy and carry a smartphone, and for many it's the preferred preferred method. So I do think that smart cards have got a limited life now, and in London I would imagine that Oyster card use is on the decline, and as Richard says, a lot of people tap on, tap off with their debit or credit card, and they've got a daily cap in place, of course. So if you're travelling around on several journeys, there's a maximum amount you'll pay per day. It's clever enough to calculate that and cap it. But I think smart cards, will not be. They've been around for a long time, and I suspect that they will start to disappear in the relatively near future.
Thank you. Councillor Rice, did you indicate? Okay, Councillor Farr.
Yeah, I was going to ask about bus shelters, and obviously I think this includes the funding for bus shelters. I'm thinking of what the ward councillor has on. Is there a way that we can sort of feed into this, or to prioritise where there's a need? I've had residents come to me, like there's a chap in a wheelchair, for instance. He's waiting for his bus and there's no shelter there, and he's getting wet through on one of the stops on Kinson Road. How can we sort of feed into that, or is it sort of dependent on the number of passengers per stop? But I'm just wondering. Thanks.
So how do members feed into the planning for the bus shelters?
One of my teams looks after the provision of bus shelters and associated infrastructure, and they obviously receive requests all the time, so they know where the demand is, and obviously there'll be feedback from working with the bus company as well where there's a need for a shelter. I mean, I have to say we are it might not seem it, but we are ahead of the game, I guess, in terms of our bus shelter provision, both in terms of the quantity and the quality. So we the team has done well over the last 10-15 years or so. But yeah, happy to add. It may well be on the list. It may well be one that's been earmarked for a shelter. But if you can perhaps let me know, and I can send that request to the team, and hopefully there'll be a shelter there in the near future.
Councillor Hadley.
Yes, I think, again, officers might correct me, but Kingston Road was part of the Transport and Travel plans, and it's a bit that we haven't been able to afford to do, but obviously as part of that, we have done major upgrades to quite a lot of bus shelters along some of the routes. So it was kind of left on the basis we were expecting to invest a big amount of money in improving bus shelters along that whole road. But I think that will be part of the balance in terms of whether we think we're going to get a chance to get in the capital money to actually do a job along there, or whether we can do a specific shelter out of that programme.
Councillor Rice. No, I think we should move on.
Yeah, one of the things about the Barcelona card is that you're buying 10 journeys, and each journey is like €1.10 or something, and so you know exactly how much you're spending. And it's very clear. You can go for like an hour and a half almost. Whereas in London, you sort of tap on with your card and you've no idea how much the journey is going to cost you, and you're pretty sure it's going to be quite expensive. Um, 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 with regards to looking at this, I'm just concerned about that not enough money is being spent on young people, out as a proportion of the total amount being spent. So I wonder whether we can feed that back to Cabinet as a formal comment. And also the the £2 unlimited journeys for a day, Saturday and Sunday, whether there's opportunity to subsidise that for including school holidays as well. I've certainly known from personal experience when I'm taking 4 children with me to the beach, it's certainly a lot cheaper to pay for parking and take the children than it is to consider taking the bus. And I would also, like, in terms of information, it would be really useful to know how much, like, journeys, like, to be able to assess how successful we are in terms of our bus pricing system, to be able to compare it with how much it would cost to go by car and park, because not many people know that we heavily subsidise private car transportation compared with how much we subsidise buses. We don't subsidise buses very much at all, compared with that. So it would be useful to start getting information in to public documents that demonstrates that.
Yes, yeah. Did anyone want to comment on that, officers? Or
On any of those points, there's a few. But I suppose the adding in the summer holidays. What's your comment on that?
I mean, that's something we can talk to the bus company about, Chairman. But obviously, it's going to cost more. So we've done our best with the amount of revenue funding available to spread it across a number of areas. It may be something that if we can't do it now, we might be able to do it with future funding awards. We understand from the Department for Transport that this BCP grant funding will continue into the future, and hopefully with a 3-year funding allocation, which will give us obviously better scope to plan and deliver it more effectively. But yeah, I've made a note of that. I think if we went back to them today, they would come back with a bigger number, which would mean that we can't do something else. So, but I've certainly noted it, and there's potential for the future.
thank you. Go on then, Councillor Rice.
Is there any flexibility with these to say, actually, we don't want that one to happen, if they came back and said, and everybody in this committee was like, yeah, we want kids to be able to travel for £1 in the summer holidays, or £2, and we're happy to get rid of one of the other things that costs 300,000. Is there flexibility there, or like, I imagine a lot of work has been put into that already anyway, so.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. The list in front of members, the list and report, has been put together in consultation with the bus company. There is a process we need to follow that involves ratification from the Enhanced Partnership Board this afternoon, and then Cabinet and Council during March. And we also have to submit our delivery programme to the Department for Transport for their final sign-off before they actually give us the funding. Having said that, there is a process to a change control process where we can make changes during the financial year if felt appropriate. And as I say, we expect that this funding will be ongoing now, and there'll be future years. So whatever we don't do straight away, there should be the opportunity for us to do it in the future.
So essentially, yes, as an advisory group today, if you want to advise to Cabinet that there ought to be an adjustment, then that would go to Cabinet as a recommendation, and Cabinet could recommend to adjust something.
Anybody want to adjust anything?
Councillor Farr.
Yeah, if I may, just sort of adding on to what Councillor Rice has been mentioning about that, I think it's the school holidays, wasn't it? The cheaper fares and the school holidays. One of the schemes has been the discount of £5 for a fiver, which is like a family ticket. I don't think I've seen this mentioned in here. I don't know if that's a subsidised thing or something that more bus.
That's just something more bus offer.
Okay, all right, thanks.
So if there are recommendations you want to put forward, if we agree on them, we can put them forward.
Is there anything from the officers that they could suggest that would be easily able to be reduced on something that would allow young people to be able to travel unlimited during the school holidays?
I think a part of this as well is obviously about trying to drive up ridership, on buses throughout the whole year, not just during a sort of summer peak period. So there's an element of that, but we could certainly look at the schedule after this meeting. Happy to come back to the group, because as John said, we're recommending to Cabinet this schedule, having discussed it with obviously the bus operator, the Enhanced Bus Partnership. They're trying to get more users onto their network to help drive down the costs of operating the network. The more riders that we can get used on the network, the more people we can drive to use the services, the less we have to subsidise it as well. So, for example, we were talking about the £1 evening fare earlier. At the moment, we're subsidising some evening routes. Well, actually, we can get more people on buses during the evening by incentivising it and making it more habitual. Then actually that means that it becomes more commercial and we won't have to subsidise it into the future. So the kind of whole programme at the moment has been devised with kind of, I guess, that in mind and that sort of philosophy. But if there's specific elements that we want to take away and look at and explore, then yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a whole host of other, I guess, barriers to that as well, aren't there, at the moment, in terms of bus usage to the... Pardon? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. By all means, happy to take that away and have a look at it. And we've obviously got the partnership meeting this afternoon. We can discuss it with them as well and get their input into it as well.
That's great, thank you.
Thank you, Richard. We better move on, otherwise Richard won't make that meeting. So next item on the agenda is the verbal report for the TROs.
So at the moment, this item's on the agenda. So the process as it works at the moment is through the Constitution, is that the advertising of traffic regulation orders is delegated to the Director for Planning and Transport, which is Wendy Lane. Is that over there? If there are any significant or contentious objections to any traffic regulation orders that are put forward and advertised, then they are then, through agreement with Wendy and through Councillor Hadley and Councillor Herrett, who's not here today, sent to TAG for debate. Councillor McCormick quite rightly earlier raised the fact that there's been an ongoing consultation in Purewell as part of the bus service improvement plan. So at the next meeting of TAG, there is very likely going to be an item on that traffic regulation order. And similarly, there's another one that's been consulted on at the moment in Southbourne, Folkestone area as part of the BCP as well. And there's potential for another one as well, but again, we've got to look at the outputs, because I think the consultation's only just closed for a speed limit proposed reduction along Parley near the airport as well, from going down from national speed limit to 40 mile an hour. So there's been quite a number of objections to that as well. So those are the types of matters that will come forward at future meetings, but until prior to this meeting, we've not had any objections and not had time ahead of this meeting to prepare those items I've just raised to be tabled today. So at future meetings, they'll go onto the forward plan, as it were. Hopefully I've waffled my way through that and that makes sense to you all.
Tony.
Yeah, I was rather worried when that item was on the agenda without actually saying what it was. And I thought, well, it's bound to include the Pure Well one. So I went out and sort of had a look at it on Sunday to kind of see what it was, and couldn't quite work out what was planned because there were notices on lampposts, but only at one end. And I thought, well, does it affect all the residential properties or what? But I think actually having advance notice of that will be very useful, because we can kind of have a look at it and get to know it if we get the opportunity to. Because I know it's contentious and, it was the bread and butter of previous transport advisory groups, and, it can be quite a difficult process. But I think if we know what's coming up early enough so that we can sort of get to have a look at it, then that will be great.
Yeah, so that's the intent. The intent was there'll be a report which sets out what the proposal was, what engagement's taken place, what the representations are, and what the recommendation is, or the options are, as it were, to then come to this group for advice. And then your advice will then obviously feed on to Cabinet to ultimately make the decision.
Thank you. And item 9, transport related updates as well.
So I think there's been a few that have obviously been covered today already. So we've just talked about the traffic regulation order items. Other things to note were the local electric vehicle infrastructure fund, which obviously got discussed as part of the LTP capital programme item. It's obviously an announcement from Active Travel England and the DfT earlier this month that the council's been awarded £1.59 million of what they're calling Consolidated Active Travel Fund from Active Travel England, and that's for walking, wheeling and cycling improvements, aligned with our local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, our LCWIP. And the award is £1.128 million of capital and £331,000 of revenue funding. So for a future cabinet, there'll be a report prepared for that, setting out how it's recommended that money is invested, and that'll obviously come through the transportation advisory group en route to cabinet for so there we go. So that'll be a future item at this meeting as well.
Thank you. Councillor Rice.
Yeah, just on that sounds interesting. And timescales for it going to cabinet then, and timescales for it to come here so that we can actually input.
We've only just recently been alerted to it, so to be confirmed. Obviously, what we'd like to do is try and get it through cabinet as soon as possible, so that we can deliver and obviously stay within the sort of, have a positive image with the Department for Transport and Active Travel England specifically.
You thinking the next cabinet meeting? Well, I don't know when the next one is.
It'd be April, I think. So it
April.
could be April. Yeah. But I'll by all means welcome suggestions outside of this meeting. If you've got suggestions, then you don't have to just stick to this group. You can put forward any suggestions at any stage.
Well, is there anybody that would be interested in an informal meet-up with Richard to look at that? I would be. Anybody else? No? Nope.
So, Chair, I'm assuming if we're aiming for April Cabinet, then we'd probably be trying to bring those items to the 19th of March meeting, given that's already scheduled, which does mean preparing papers quite soon for them. But if I don't know whether we can fit in an informal meeting before that, or whether it is just a case of members advising, or what we can do in terms of the building of that report. But it's going to happen quite quickly, I think, isn't it?
Well, an informal meeting is much easier because you don't really need to have the papers prepared. The officers can just answer the questions and members can just get a feeling for what is flexible and what's not.
I think I mean, the next meeting is the 19th of March. Hopefully we'll get the papers in time for that. And we can, and then Cabinet's not until April, so I think we're okay.
I mean, as I say, there's £1.128 million worth of capital, and there's £331,000 worth of revenue funding. So it's about, and the ATE guidance is it's for, your priorities for walking, wheeling and cycling in line with your local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, or LCWIP, which has obviously been, adopted and approved by Council in May 2022.
Nobody else wants to meet up with Richard then, just to clarify, because I will be.
Time. Tony.
Yeah, I was thinking out loud because we're looking at sort of a problem area for other reasons, and there's a possible active travel link that could be planned into it, because residents have made suggestions which make a lot of sense, and we're not talking about hundreds of thousands of pounds worth of work, but it's actually fairly close to something which I was told was being looked at a few years ago, but I've heard nothing about it since. And that was we're looking at an alternative cycle-friendly route to Alder Road, and I'm wondering whether there is any information or kind of details on that can be shared, and whether the thoughts that have been fed to me and that I've sort of had thinking of other issues, whether that fits into it, if you see what I mean. But I was told it was being looked at, and I'm going back best part of 5 years ago now, when the transforming travel sort of took over and that became the main priority. And I'm just kind of wondering whether anything has been looked at there, or whether there's any sort of outline ideas that perhaps have just been put to one side that might, other ideas that are coming up might fit in with.
I mean, obviously there's lots of wards across the whole of BCP with lots of ideas about quiet routes, and everyone's a high priority. But in terms of the specific scheme you're discussing, I don't know obviously the detail of it. I'm quite happy to speak to you after the meeting and feed that to the sustainable travel team to get an update for you on that. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm fine, but I was told specifically that was being actively looked at within transportation, and that was the last I heard of it. And
as I say, if you tell me where it is and what it is after the meeting, I'm quite happy to take it away, have a look at it, and provide you with an update.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, members. It's date of the next meeting is the 19th of March. So I shall close this meeting. Thank you.
Can we have a work plan added to the agenda for the next meeting, so that we're able to suggest items to bring to the meetings?
I don't see why not. Absolutely.
Thank you.
So, meeting's closed.